All right, let's dive right in. We're going to talk about a subject that, let's be honest, many of us spend a lot of time trying not to think about: death. It's the one thing we all have in common, but it's often surrounded by silence and, well, fear. So today, we're going to pull back that curtain and look at death for what it is: a really complex system of culture, medicine, psychology, and personal experience.
You know, the poet William Cullen Bryant had this idea of death as something peaceful. To him, it was like wrapping yourself in a warm blanket and just lying down for a pleasant dream. It's such a beautiful and serene image, but boy, does it feel different from how our culture often treats the end of life today.
And that really gets to the heart of the issue, right? This idea that we live in a death-denying culture. Just think about it for a second. We don't say died, we say passed away. We have funeral homes that focus on making people look like they're just sleeping. We're obsessed with staying young, and we tend to hide away the elderly, who are a constant reminder of our own mortality. This denial actually shapes everything.
So, to really unpack all this, we've broken it down into 5 parts. We're going to start big with the societal systems around death. Then, we'll zoom in a bit to the tricky medical and ethical definitions. From there, it gets super personal. We'll explore how people face their own mortality and how we grieve for others. And finally, we'll look at the rituals that help us all cope.
Okay, first up, the system we all live in. You see, every culture has what sociologist Robert Kastenbaum called a death system. It's basically a blueprint for how to think, feel, and act when death shows up.
And this system isn't some abstract thing. It's made up of real, everyday components. The people? Well, that's your clergy, funeral directors, doctors. The places? Hospitals, cemeteries, hospices. Times are holidays like Memorial Day, moments we set aside to remember. Objects are things like caskets or black clothing. And symbols, like a skull and crossbones, they tell a whole story in an instant. All these things together give us a script for what to do.
And our modern script has been shaped by this one incredible fact. In just over 100 years, life expectancy has almost doubled. Think about it. In 1900, death was a pretty frequent visitor, and it usually happened at home. But today, over 80% of deaths happen in institutions. This has totally pushed death out of our daily lives, making it feel so much more foreign and, frankly, scarier.
Which leads us perfectly into our second section. Because with all our modern medicine, the very definition of when life is over has become this incredibly complex medical and ethical puzzle.
It used to be so simple, right? No heartbeat, no breath, that's it. But now, with life support technology that can keep a body going, how do we actually know? This single question is at the center of some of the hardest decisions that families and doctors ever have to face.
So the medical standard we use today is brain death. A flat EEG reading shows that all the electrical buzz in the brain has just stopped. But even here there's a debate. Should death be when the entire brain stops working, or just the higher parts, the parts that hold our consciousness, our personality? The answer to that changes everything.
And this leads us to the really tough concept of euthanasia. Let's start with passive euthanasia. This is when treatment is withheld, basically allowing death to happen naturally. The case of Terry Schiavo, who was in a vegetative state for 15 years, brought this issue right into everyone's living rooms and sparked this massive, painful debate over who gets to make that choice.
Then you have the flip side, active euthanasia. This is when death is deliberately induced to end someone's suffering. And this is way more controversial. You just have to think of Dr. Jack Kevorkian, nicknamed Dr. Death. His actions landed him in prison for murder and ignited a firestorm of a debate that is still raging today. Okay, let's make a big pivot here. We've talked about society and medicine, but now let's get deeply personal. How do we, as individuals, actually process the knowledge that our own life is coming to an end?
Now, the most famous framework for this, and you've probably heard of it, comes from Elizabeth Kubler-Ross and her 5 stages. First, there's denial. No, this can't be happening to me. Then comes anger. Why me? After that, bargaining, trying to make a deal for more time. Then depression, as the reality really sinks in. And finally, for some, a sense of quiet acceptance.
But, and this is a really important but, this model isn't a strict roadmap. It's not like a checklist. Research has never actually proven that people go through these stages in this exact order, or even that they go through all of them. It's way better to think of them as possible reactions, like emotions that can come and go, overlap, or even repeat. A person's own life and circumstances matter so much more than any neat little sequence.
So that brings us to the other side of the coin. What happens when we're the ones left behind? Coping with the death of someone we love. And that journey of grief is just as messy, complex, and individual as the journey of dying.
A more modern way of looking at grief is called the dual process model. It suggests that healthy coping is all about oscillating, kind of like a pendulum swinging back and forth between two things. On one side, you have loss-oriented stuff. That's the raw grief, the yearning. On the other side, you have restoration-oriented stuff. That's rebuilding, learning new skills, figuring out who you are now. The goal isn't to forget, but to integrate that loss while you figure out how to live again. For most of us, grief does become more manageable with time, but for almost 1 in 10 adults, it doesn't. They can experience something called prolonged grief disorder, where that intense despair, that feeling of being lost, just doesn't fade. It becomes enduring and unresolved, and often requires professional help. It's a powerful reminder that grief isn't something you just get over.
Okay, for our final section, let's zoom back out and look at the cultural practices and rituals. The things we do as a community to make sense of loss and honor the people we've lost.
And wow, this chart shows a huge shift in American mourning. Back in 1985, only about 14% of people were cremated. Fast forward to 2017, and that number rocketed to over half. This isn't just about saving money, it reflects a massive change in how we think about tradition, religion, and remembrance itself.
You know, different cultures have entirely different toolkits for mourning. Take the Amish community. They provide intense support for the bereaved for a full year, with a focus on calm acceptance. In traditional Judaism, you have structured periods like Shiva, which are designed to help people process their feelings and then gently guide them back into the community. Both provide this incredibly powerful built-in support system.
And all of this brings us to one final crucial thought. Seeing how all these systems work, from the huge societal level right down to our own personal grief, it all points to one big question. In a culture that so often wants to deny death, maybe understanding these frameworks can give us better tools. It lets us ask ourselves, how can we build stronger communities of care? And how can we get better at supporting each other through one of life's most profound and, yes, inevitable experiences?